good afternoon, everybody. We're excited that you've joined us for our first statewide webinar of November. This is the emotional side of learning disabilities. And thank you for joining us. Before we get started, let's cover a few of our rules of the webinar and the way that we work things. You have seen, I'm sure by now, that we are interacting in the chat box. So over here in the chat box, you can see the link for the PowerPoint. We'll share the link to find the recording when all is said and done. If you're having any technical issues, anything like that, please feel free to message us over here in the chat box, any comments that you may have or anything like that. On your menu bar, which is either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on how your Zoom is set up, you will see that there's also a box for Q&A. And it's that little box and it has a Q in it. And Dr. Behl is taking questions. We're going to do a live Q&A here at the end of her presentation. So if you have a question about the presentation or something for Dr. Behl, please put that in the Q&A box. We want to make sure that we see it and it doesn't get lost in the chat box. So that's where questions go, over here to the Q&A. All right, well, before I release it to Dr. Behl, let's talk about who Partners Resource Network is and who we are. I'm Megan Sanders. I'm Training and Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network. And this is Christina Henning. She is the Director of Statewide Services. And Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. You know us in your area most likely as the PATH Project, the PEN Project, or the TEAM Project. And we provide parents and professionals with information, education, training, and referrals, and then technical assistance and emotional support for parents of children birth to 26 years of age. We are federally funded by a grant from Department of Education, Office of Special Education, known as OSEP. All right, before we get her on, this is Dr. Behl. Dr. Behl is an LPC intern in Texas and a licensed school counselor in Ohio. Dr. Behl is a professor at West Texas A&M University and has been working closely with the Center for Learning Disabilities. She has been working with parents of children with disability through individual and group counseling sessions. She has experience in counseling adults and children. All right, Dr. Behl, whenever you are ready, we'll leave it to you.
There you go. You're unmuted now. Can you hear him, Megan? Dr. Behl, we can't hear you.
It was fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can still hear you.
And so can my Alexa. So my name is Dr. Malvika Behl. I am a faculty at West Texas A&M, as Megan said. I have been working with parents and kids with learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia, since January of this year. Yes, I do support groups for parents whose kids have dyslexia, Tuesday evenings in Amarillo. They're provided through the Center for Learning Disabilities. I also do some clinical hours at the Turn Center in Amarillo, where I see kids for counseling. The presentation today is about the emotional side of learning disabilities. We will kind of discuss a few things. I will not have access to the chat box because I will see a question and I will get distracted and my ADHD will kick in. So I'm going to take Q&A at the very end. I want to get through this presentation, provide you with as much information as I can, and then we can move forward. The objectives of this presentation is to address the emotions that are involved in the diagnosing process, kind of discussing the grieving process that some parents go through when their kids are diagnosed with a learning disability. And I'm going to discuss 4 stages of adaptation. It comes from the book called Nobody's Perfect. On research. We'll kind of talk about the 4 stages of adaptation and how that goes. The emotions that parents might face when their kids have a diagnosis could go from anger, bargaining, relief, fear, frustration, blame, guilt, shame. There are a lot of feelings, and they're not just feelings towards a certain person. It is just, some people will go back and say, well, I should have done this, or I could have done this. I should have read more to my child, or I should have been able to have a conversation with my child. And there is some sort of relief that parents face, which is, well, no, that makes sense. Or I have had this thought process for a really long time that there's something going on, and we just couldn't pinpoint it. So now I have finally figured out what's going on. So there's a Kubler-Ross model that was developed in 1969, which is the 5 stages of grief. Some parents that I have worked with have gone through these 5 stages where they figure out, or the teacher comes to the parents and says, well, I think there's something going on. I cannot pinpoint it, but we kind of have to figure out what it is. So the parent goes to, I don't think so. So then there is the bargaining of, why my child? So then there's denial, where you're saying, maybe not, maybe. There's bargaining that says, why my child? Why does our family have to go through this? There is anger, not at your child, not at another person, just anger as to why. Then there's depression, and there's acceptance. Depression it's not when I say depression, it's not a diagnosable depression. It is the sad feeling that you get. You're like, I feel completely hopeless and helpless. I really do not know what to do, or how to move forward, or what kind of situation, what can I do to help my child, to help our family? What can I do? So you're kind of going through this cycle. Now, are you going to go in that order? Probably not. It is more of you go to denial, then you feel that you've accepted it. Then you go to bargaining, you go to anger, and then you might feel, okay, I've accepted it now. And then something would happen, and it would cause a certain kind of depression or feeling of hopelessness or helplessness. And you're like, okay, maybe not. So you're going through these stages. You could go through them for a week. You could go through them for a month. It might take you a year. It is completely up to the person who is going through this process to say, okay, I have accepted it. Okay, maybe not. Or you take one step forward, one step back, two steps back. But it's kind of your own personal process. It's nobody sitting up there should be telling you, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or, you know, you shouldn't be feeling so hopeless. There's so many resources available. Well, you have the right to feel whatever you want to feel as a parent. When somebody's going through the stages of grief, the best idea or the best way to move forward is to surround yourself with advocates who would be willing to help you, advocates who would be willing to show you the direction you could go forward in, somebody who's giving you options, not somebody who's telling you, well, you shouldn't be feeling that way. Or you go to somebody and say, well, I feel hopeless, and they're saying, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Well, you have the right to go through these stages if that is something that you are going through. There is another model of grief by Wright, which is newer. It was developed in 2011, and it has 7 stages. So it starts with shock and denial, when you are in disbelief, and it seems like the worst thing ever.
Hey,
You do
Dr.
not know.
Bell,
Yep.
can we work on your microphone for just a second? Sorry, there's
Sure.
comments in the chat box that you're going in and out.
Oh, sure.
Is it, I don't know exactly how we can fix it. Is it possible to use the sound without the microphone, without like the plug-in, maybe?
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yeah.
I think what it was, it's sliding on your hair and it's picking up that sound higher than your voice.
Okay, let's try this.
All right, sorry about that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry. Okay, the 7 stages of grief. So when you go back to thinking about somebody who recently received a diagnosis, somebody who does not have a history of learning disability in their family would go through the initial shock of it could be devastating to them. Like, I don't understand, how did this happen? Or I don't understand, how did this situation affect, how does the situation affect our family? You feel overwhelmed, and you want to emotionally protect yourself and your family, but at the same time you feel a sense of pain, some sort of shock. The next step that they say is pain and guilt. There's excruciating pain, there is feeling of numbness at times, and you're feeling that. And then there's guilt, where you're telling, well, you're not sure, did I do something? Did something that I not do that caused my child to get this learning disability? And you start to feel that guilt. And it could be a day, it could be a week, but it's something that you as a parent would have to process. That feeling would have to be processed by you for you to be able to move forward. The next step is kind of our anger and bargaining, where your frustration could lead to anger. It's uncontrolled, and it can be permanent. That anger can be permanent until a person decides to work on it. The anger could be towards yourself, towards the system, or you could be negotiating with a higher power to kind of bargain through that situation. And you have to work through it yourself. That anger has to be worked through for you to move forward and reach acceptance. Now, will you get angry at times when you are not receiving the help that you were supposed to? Of course. Does that mean that you're in the 7 stages of grief? Maybe, maybe not. But with the initial diagnosis of learning disability, is the anger could be a part of you grieving through that process, grieving through having a kid or having somebody who has a learning disability. And it's tough. It's tough for some parents to kind of go through that process. It's very emotional. It is very, you have hopes. You see your kid at a certain place. And when they are diagnosed with that learning disability, it is a shock. It is that guilt comes in. There is that anger, because your hopes for your child now have to be changed. Now they have to be changed to meet your child's abilities. Is there something wrong with changing those hopes to meet your child's abilities? No. But you still, as a person who had these hopes for your child, go through these processes, the stages of grief, to be able to understand that, well, I might have to change my hopes a little bit so that my child does not have any issues. Then there is depression, reflection, and loneliness. This is that time where sadness overtakes and the magnitude of loss probably sets in. You have that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. There is the upward turn, where a person starts to make life becomes a little more calmer. You become a little more functional. Going back to depression, reflection, and loneliness, at that stage, there is a possibility that parents might feel, well, I'm the only one in this situation. And you kind of have to work through, well, am I the only one, or are there people out there as well? So you could, at that, and when you take that upward turn, that is when you figure out, well, there are people out there who are going through the same thing that I am, who might be feeling the same way that I am. I'm not the only person going through this situation. Then there is reconstruction and working through. When you become more realistic, you figure out solutions to your problems and moving forward with that, with moving forward towards acceptance. And then the last stage is acceptance and hope. When the person accepts and deals with the reality of the situation, when you're accepting, okay, this is what happened. I'm going to work on accepting this. Now, is everybody going through like the previous stage of grief? Is everybody going to go through this exactly the same way as it's mapped out? No. It is more of a loop than it is a linear process. You could go through guilt and then acceptance, then the upward turn, and then loneliness, then reconstruction, anger, shock. You could go through it whichever way your personal, whichever way you feel. This is your journey as a parent. You have the right to go through any of these, none of these, whichever way you feel. Okay, so Miller, Dr. Nancy Miller, in 1994 wrote a book. It's called Nobody's Perfect. Living and Growing with Children Who Have Special Needs. See, she was a social worker, and she did a longitudinal study with mothers whose kids had special needs. And I think she had 5 or 6 mothers that she worked with over the years. It's a really good book. It is available on Amazon if that is something that you want to read. She kind of talks about these 4 stages of adaptation that the parents of kids who have special needs, in this case, a learning disability, might go through. Now, is she saying these are only the 4 stages that you are going to go through? No. She's saying these are some of the stages that you might go through. So the stage 1 is surviving, stage 2 is searching, stage 3 is settling in, and stage 4 is separating. So when we talk about stage 1, which is surviving is basically the initial part of the diagnosis. You are either, you just figured out, a teacher came to you and said, well, your child might have a learning disability. That is when people hear it, they either feel sad or frightened by the news. And Dr. Nancy Miller says it as well, and I'm going to quote it. Anyone who tells you that you should not have any of these reactions has not been where you are. You could feel shock. You could feel bodily stress and symptoms, which could be fatigue, headaches, stomach aches, loss of appetite, feelings of weakness, being vulnerable. You could feel grief or loss. Grief and feelings of helplessness, being alone, that you're the only person that might be going through this. Sadness, depression. There's confusion, there's chaos, there's uncertainty. There's worry for your child. There's that anxiety of what's next. We're all scared of the unknown, and this could be an unknown for you, where you're thinking, I don't know, what's next? What do I do next? And some people are able to find the resources to move forward, and some people have to really struggle to find the resources. There is guilt, there's self-pity, there's self-doubt, there's shame, and there's embarrassment. Some people that I have spoken with do go through the process of, what if the world finds out? What happens if my kid's friends don't want to be his friends anymore because the kid has a learning disability? You go through that process. There's denial, there's anger, when there's resentment, there's envy, there's blaming, there's a feeling of betrayal, there's denial. There is a chosen denial, that you're denying this because you don't want to believe it. And then there is an unconscious denial, where you are thinking, okay, fine, the teacher says that, we'll look into it, but we'll go through the diagnosing process, but I think the teacher's wrong. The one thing that you need to understand about this process and the steps for easing the surviving process is that understand your feelings are normal. They are your feelings. Everybody goes through every situation differently. You have to try to make time for yourself, and you have to create and use your support system. You got to make time for yourself, for you to be able to go through that process. We all want to figure out answers. You Google it, you want to know what it is. But before that, you have to normalize it for yourself. It's okay. I'll be okay. I kind of just need to make time for myself. Engage in some self-care as parents to be able to take care of yourself. I always tell this to my group of parents. You can never pour out of an empty glass. You got to keep your glass full so that you are able to pour into your kid's glass. So you want to be able to take care of yourself, make time for yourself, have that support system. The group that I do right now has a set of moms that come and attend the sessions. And they talk about self-care and how important self-care is, how important it is for them to engage in making sure that they're taking care of their needs. Because it is right, when you have an empty glass, you cannot help your child. You want to be able to have your glass full so you can pour it into your child's glass. The second stage is searching. Now there are two types of searching. There is an outer searching, where you're searching for answers to your child's problem, and then there is an inner searching. People who move from surviving to searching are now trying to look for a sense of control over their life, over this diagnosis that they have. And searching may dominate you for a while, and it may never go away, or it may go away for a little while and then come back. It completely depends on the parent's personality. So when you look at going back, this process of searching also helps parents understand that you have a lot of strength. During this searching process, you will figure out the strengths that you have as a person, as a parent, and it'll be a lot more strength than you would have ever imagined. So outer searching gives you knowledge. You want to figure out what the diagnosis is. Is there a label? Is there something that I can figure out? You figure out a new perspective. You have a new awareness towards your child's diagnosis by contacting your family members or by reaching out to local agencies. And then there's that strength. Strength through a sense of competence, control, and empowerment. You are empowering, you're trying to figure out how you can gain that control, and you get a sense of control, a sense of competence. Okay, I know what this is now. So you're doing that outer searching. Outer searching involves Googling things and finding resources for your child. There are some obstacles to successful outer searching, but they are, you can jump over them at times. There's stuff like child-related issues, when your child may not improve as fast as you hoped that your child would improve. Your child doesn't like the program that you selected for them, or your child may not learn the skills as fast as you want them to. Then there is the feeling, parent-related issues, where you're feeling powerless. You're feeling angry because the funds that were for the program that your child was a part of the program was removed, or your child doesn't qualify for that specific program. You are feeling that exhaustion of driving your child everywhere, doing therapy, driving there, waiting. And that can be exhausting on parents as well when you are doing that. And there are other children that are waiting at home, and they want as much attention as the other child, and they are unable to get that because you're right now focused on helping your child with a learning disability. And then there's the program-related issue, where the program is too expensive, or the doctors do not have an answer for you, or your child was misdiagnosed. And at this point, you're making tough decisions, not for just yourself and your child, but your entire family. The one thing that Dr. Miller talks about is there are no perfect programs, interventions, or quick cures. There's no overnight thing that can just fix the issue. It is something that takes time, patience, And there could be that you feel stuck in the searching stage for a really long time. The other part is the inner searching. The inner searching is when you are searching in yourself. You're thinking, am I a good enough parent to meet my child's needs? How will my other children get affected when I am working towards helping my child with a learning disability? How will my marriage get affected? How will my job get affected? How will my interests get affected? There could be feelings of anxiety, depression, and sometimes you might feel incompetent. You might worry, what happens to my child if I'm not here? What then? What if I'm not around? What's going to happen? While you're going through that process, you will learn the fact that you will learn to recognize what you can control, the things you can focus on, and work on them. And during this journey of inner searching, you will realize that life is going to be a lot different than what you expected it to be. And that's okay. Life's different. And you're going to have a new identity. During the inner searching, you're going to have a new identity as a parent whose child has a learning disability or who has special needs. Things during this inner searching that you might learn is the fact that life is not fair. No one is going to rescue you and just make it okay. You kind of have to work on it. You have to be realistic about your child's abilities and limitations. Your child's abilities, limitations, has nothing to do with your self-esteem. But during the outer searching and the inner searching, and while working with your child during this stage, you might also realize that your child might have learning disability, but also have another part of it, which is they might have behavioral issues or self-esteem issues that you kind of want to work with them on. It is very common for a child with a learning disability to have self-esteem issues. And that is something that you as a parent would have to work with them on. I recently had a child tell me that they feel that their teacher doesn't like them because the teacher only likes smart people, which was heartbreaking for me because that is one of the smartest kids I know. And this child saying, well, my teacher doesn't like me because I'm not smart enough. And then you're trying to help the child understand, but it is not something that you can continue saying and they'll accept it. They have to recognize it as children, and they have to accept the fact that they might have some limitations, but that is something, but they have these all other strengths. We do an exercise in our parent group where as parents, they sit down and they recognize their strengths. You write down 5 strengths and 3 weaknesses. And then if a parent feels they have more than 5 strengths, they can write down more than 5 strengths. And as parents, the idea is to help parents do learn the strategies in the session. So when they go home, they can help their kids understand that, well, you might have this limitation, or reading could be a problem for you. But see, even without the reading, you can make these amazing Lego blocks, or you are able to do math so well. And your math abilities are so good. So you kind of have to help your child realize that. During the inner searching, you will also learn the fact that things will change. Some things will become harder and some things will become easier. And somewhere along the line, you're going to make a mistake. That's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And why should a parent expect themselves to be perfect? And you will also realize the fact that you're not the same person you would have been if your child did not have the learning disability. Now, you can be more positive, you can be more willing to learn more, or you could be a little challenging, or still continue feeling disappointed. That it is all about perspective. What perspective do I want to take? Do I want to be more positive, learn more positively, receive more information, and be able to help my child? Or do I want to be, well, I've been working with you as a parent, you can go to a teacher and say, well, I've been working with you for 3 days and I don't see change. What are you going to do? So you kind of have to figure out whether you're going to be, you can act challenging, you can be a little challenging, or you can be more positive and work with people to be able to help your child. The next stage is settling in. Settling in is seeing the world for what it is and seeing yourself for who you are. You are working on establishing a new sense of stability and harmony. There is a shift in your attitude. You work on understanding what your child's needs are. Your definition of normal has changed. There is a new normalcy in your family. You don't have to spend every available moment teaching your child. You're not spending every time that you have that you're telling your child, okay, let's go read, let's go do math. You find yourself letting go of unrealistic expectations. And even though you are in the settling in stage, there is a possibility that searching is reactivated. If it's outer searching or it's inner searching, either way, it's kind of reactivated from time to time. You might, and there could be a sense of guilt or sadness or being scared from time to time. Then there is a shift in balance where you, where you set new priorities for your life and your children's lives. Your child's total needs have become your focus and not just the disability. So you're focusing on their needs rather than focusing on their disability. You've already learned to juggle all the different daily requirements. You have a new daily routine that you work on, and some things get easier and some things get harder, and many things will just be a little different. There's a shift in control. There's a shift in control where you are feeling a lot more control of your life. You no longer just react to a situation. You are working on certain things. You're moving forward with a sense of focus and purpose. You're able to make better choices for you and your family. There are certain obstacles to this stage as well, where you are lack of financial resources or not having adequate insurance could be a problem. Parenting, being a single parent, could be a lot difficult during this process as well. And if you are in the settling in stage, you might go back and kind of go back to, okay, we're going to move, or we're going to move school districts. And you go back to the surviving and the searching, and then you reach settling in again. This last stage, is stage 4, is separation, where you are stepping towards independence, helping your child reach independence. You're working with your child to help them develop their self-esteem, a sense of humor, having them learn daily living skills, have a pride in their physical appearance, living skills practice, learning self-discipline, understanding and living with a disability, or learning to meet the challenges. You are working on your child to help them live in a community that's separate from you, because at some point your child's going to be 18. Your child will could go to college. Your child could go and get a degree in something. And colleges don't call parents and check in with them or talk to parents about the disabilities. The child has to advocate for themselves. So you have to teach your child how to be able to advocate for themselves. You can do that as a parent. You could do that as a family, where you are working with all your kids together, helping them develop these skills. So it is important that the child is able to learn those skills. And as parents, it will be your responsibility to impart that knowledge to them. And then there is that stage of letting go. And I'm going to leave that to parents, as everybody's definition of letting go is different. When I say letting go, that just doesn't mean, okay, go ahead, the world, it's you and the world now, but kind of slowly moving them towards the world where they're taking a little responsibility at a time. They're taking responsibility of reaching out to the teacher, or they are reaching out to the school counselor and saying, well, this is something that I want, but I'm not getting. Those kind of things. Eventually, by the time they're 18, they're able to take at least some of the responsibilities as an adult. This is the book that I was talking about, Nobody's Perfect, Living and Growing with Children Who Have Special Needs. It is by Nancy B. Miller. These are my references. Let's talk questions.
Okay, Megan, try now. There you go.
Yes, we are good. All right, so we do have a couple of questions I've seen come in the chat box.
Okay.
If I miss your question, please put it in the Q&A box to make sure that we don't miss it. So one of the first questions I see is, can this lead to permanent depression if it seems like the ground doesn't seem to settle underneath you for only short periods, 6 months or less?
Well, it is your emotions. It is what you are going through. It's not my place to say, oh, of course, or of course not. It is your emotions that you as a person, as a parent, are feeling. Counseling could be good alternative for you if that is something that you would like to go through. That could be self-care for you. There is, when you do have a child with a learning disability, you go through a new normalcy. You develop that new normalcy, and it could be, and change is tough for a lot of people. So you kind of want to be able to say, well, I have this issue, maybe counseling could help. So maybe or even finding a support group where you can meet with other people and talk about this issue, that could be helpful.
All right, perfect. I'm seeing if I can find other questions. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box so that we can get them answered. Here we go. How do you deal with years of bullying from teachers and students? Now there's a fear of dealing with either and going forward with education when IQ and ability are high. Counseling has been rejected.
That's a tough situation to be in because your teachers are supposed to be your advocates, people who are supposed to stand by you. So you kind of have that issue. That's a tough situation. I don't have specifically an answer for that. As a parent, I couldn't even imagine. There is a fear that fear of, and that mistrust of the education system starts there, where you start to mistrust the system and say, well, I'm not really sure this is the best thing for my child. And I understand that. It is just working with your child, making sure that you are your child's cheerleader, and your responsibility would be to cheerlead your child into helping them and providing them the best resources. That's the best way I can answer your question.
Okay. I'm looking at trying to get through and make sure.
When you say they, what do you mean? You say, and then they reject you because you didn't succeed in protecting them. When you mean they.
She just did a follow-up in the Q&A box, and she was, I believe, talking about her child.
Oh, okay.
She says, that they reject you because you didn't succeed in protecting them. So I would assume she's talking about the kiddo.
The kiddo, yeah.
Yes, and she did follow up. Both have the same issue. They're all adults.
Yeah, and that's a tough situation to be there. You have to help them understand that, you as a parent cannot make other people do what you want them to do. So you kind of have to work from that angle. And kids are smart. Sometimes when you have that conversation with them and tell them, well, I really want to help you, but I cannot control other people's behaviors. I can only control mine and ours as a family. So let's talk about how as a family we can help you feel protected.
All right, we got a question from Kristen. How can I move on without a diagnosis? I feel like I've been in the anger stage for 6 years. Wow,
6 years without a diagnosis. That's hard. You kind of have to work on, if you don't, it makes sense, because if you don't have the diagnosis, you're not going to receive the help you need from the school or any other entity for that matter. But then there are people, or there are places where you can go to receive help. Receive help from other parents who might be feeling the same way, or who for whom it took a really long time to receive that diagnosis. So working on yourself, reflecting on how things are going for you, and working on through that inner searching stage of, okay, even though there is not a diagnosis, what can we do as a family to meet the child's needs? Because all you can do is control your behavior. What you do, you cannot make the school do something without a diagnosis.
Sure. Okay, here's a question, comment, looking for feedback. I found myself at frustration level because my nephew's IEP isn't known by other school personnel. It seems the only ones who know him and his disabilities are the special education team. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, technically, it is the school's responsibility to make sure that everybody on campus have information about the child's IEP. So you could speak to the principal and have a conversation with them and letting them know that you were made aware that the teachers who might not have been aware of the child's IEP, and the principal might want to get ahead and do that. And I would do that in writing rather than in email, so you have documentation.
Says one of the biggest challenges is continue to be having those difficult conversations with parents about realistic goals for students with significant special needs. The same person.
And she followed up with, can you give recommendations on how to have these conversations?
Okay.
I have had certain amount of conversations with parents whose kids have special needs where you have to meet the parent where they are and kind of work from there. The parent has certain hopes and dreams for their child. Recently, there was a diagnosis and there's a shock phase where they're going through when they are unable to understand how to move forward. You are their resource. You can, there are ways of telling them, well, this sounds like a really realistic goal. And you can tell, and you can go be very specific about those goals to help your child understand, help the parent understand them. You can also say, well, we're working on this goal. We will see what would happen. And then you can put a timeline and say, in 4 weeks, we will come back and reconsider. So when in 4 weeks, they have these expectations of the child, but the child is unable to meet those expectations. You can go back and say, see, we tried this, but the parent is unable to meet, the child is unable to meet those expectations. Here is what my suggestion is. And then you can go forward from there.
That is all I see on my end. Christina, did you see anything else come through?
No, I haven't seen anything else come in. So we'll give one more call for questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Perfect.
Really appreciate you joining us today, Dr. Behl, because this is something I particularly struggled with my son. You know, I thought he was a wonderful, brilliant boy. He is, but you get in the ARD meetings and the first thing they do is tell you all the stuff that he can't do and all the stuff that they think he'll never achieve. And it's just very difficult.
Yeah.
I'm 23 and it still makes me get watery eyes when I think about it.
Yeah, and it's tough because you have the hopes and dreams as soon as they were born. And then your expectations have to change per the situation. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, everybody goes through that emotional side. So
No, and I call my son, he's the late bloomer. He's doing all the stuff, but he does it on his timeline and when he's ready, you know. So it works out, but it was rough. The school years were rough. So I don't see anything else. We've got a comment from Lois saying thanks. It was a great webinar. So I think.
Oh.
No, we had a parent, I think she's saying she's a special ed teacher, and she says one of her challenges is getting the parents support once they get the diagnosis.
that's interesting. Because you would think that the parent would want to be there, and you could have a conversation with the parent discussing with them, and that's completely a suggestion where you're saying, well, this is the diagnosis, this is what I would suggest that you could do at home to help the child. We do counseling, so we see the kid I see the kid once a week for like 30 minutes or 45 minutes, but the child spends most of their time at home. And I give them suggestions of this is what you can do at home to help your child. And now, when you give a suggestion, it's up to them whether they want to accept it or not. And that's the best that you can do. You can help them. You can provide them with the best information that's possible. But if they do not want to do anything, there's not much that you can do to change that.
Right.
So.
All right, Megan, I think we're ready to wrap. Let me shut these screens down. I'm gonna pull up.
Do you want me to stop sharing?
No. I've got override.
There we go.
One thing
that
sorry, Megan. One thing that I want to say before we end is, as faculty at WT, we are doing research for Texas for parents whose kids have dyslexia. If you are interested in being part of that research, my email address is mbehl@wtamu.edu. Please feel free to email me. If you have any questions that you cannot think about right now, but might think about it later or tomorrow, my email address is mbehl@wtamu.edu, and please feel free to email me. My email address, Megan just sent that via chat, and it's also on the PowerPoint.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Well, we're going to wrap up this webinar. But before we do, let's talk about what we have coming up. Join us on Thursday as we do a walkthrough of the Texas legal framework, and that will be done in collaboration with Region 18 ESC. And then next Tuesday, November 12th at 12:15, we have transition services in the IEP, and that's from David Bianchi, who's the Director of Advocacy for Circle and Associates. And then Wednesday, November 13th, we're going to have a collaboration webinar with Region 10 ESC on Child Find. What is it and how does it work? And then November 19th, Helpful Hints for Military Families with EFMs, done by Carrie Pico, Military Outreach Specialist. And then Dyscalculia, Mathematics Learning Disability, Causes, Characteristics, and Interventions. That is Tuesday, December 3rd at 2:15 with Dr. Shed at West Texas A&M.
I think that's a typo. That's supposed to be
12:15?
12:15, yes.
I was kind of thinking that, but I thought, well, I don't know.
We only have the one at 2:15, so
That one will be at 12:15.
12:15.
So, thank you guys for joining us today. We hope we'll see you on Thursday as well as on our webinars over the next few weeks. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions for webinar topics, please send those my way. My email address is on the screen as well as Christina's. We love to hear from you guys. We love your feedback. We take it all very seriously. Also, make sure if you want to catch the recording of any of our webinars, this one, past ones, and the ones in the future, you can get on our website, prntexas.org/statewide webinars, and join us on Facebook. We do some really cool Facebook Lives, share some awesome insight and things like that, as well as the recording for our webinars. So be sure and follow us there. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Dr. Behl, for joining us. It's a great webinar.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.